Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The morning sun streamed through the cathedral's stained glass windows, painting rainbows across the marble floor where Ethan Carter stood, adjusting his platinum cufflinks for the 100th time. His hands trembled, not from nerves about marriage, but from overwhelming joy that in 30 minutes, Sophia Bennett would walk down that aisle and become his wife, his partner, his everything. "Stop fidgeting," his best man whispered. But Ethan barely heard him. His eyes remained fixed on the massive oak doors at the cathedral's entrance, willing them to open and reveal the woman who had transformed his carefully ordered world into something beautiful and wild. Ethan had always been the perfect son. Harvard MBA by 25. Vice President of Carter Enterprises by 28. Every decision filtered through his mother's iron expectations, until Sophia, with her infectious laugh that made board meetings seem trivial. Sophia, who challenged his conservative views and made him dream beyond profit margins. Sophia, who saw him not as Eleanor Harris Carter's heir, but simply as Ethan, the man who left terrible voice messages when nervous and secretly fed stray cats behind his office building. In the front pew, Eleanor sat like a queen holding court, her Chanel suit immaculate, her smile camera ready for the society. Photographers. She had objected to everything about this wedding. The bride's family background, the venue choice, even the flowers. "Peonies are so common, darling," she had told Ethan with that particular tone that could freeze champagne, and that girl's family, well, they're certainly trying their best. But Ethan had stopped listening to his mother's subtle criticisms months ago. Today was about love, pure, defiant, unstoppable love that refused to be contained by society's expectations or his mother's approval. The organ's first majestic notes filled the cathedral, and Ethan's heart nearly stopped. The doors opened with ceremonial grandeur, and there she was. Sophia moved down the aisle like living poetry, her champagne silk dress flowing around her like liquid starlight. Her dark skin glowed against the delicate fabric, and her eyes, those brilliant brown eyes that had captivated him from their very first meeting at a charity auction, were locked on his with unwavering devotion. She carried white roses mixed with the peonies Ethan had insisted on, a small rebellion that made him smile despite the tears threatening to spill. Her father, Thomas Bennett, walked beside her with quiet dignity, his chest puffed with pride despite wearing a rental tuxedo among designer suits. Behind them came Sophia's younger sister, Lily, as maid of honor, beaming with genuine joy that felt warm and authentic, so different from the polite applause from the Carter side of the cathedral. As they approached the altar, Ethan caught Eleanor's expression in his peripheral vision. Her smile remained camera-ready, but her eyes were cold as winter glass, calculating every detail of this union she couldn't prevent. For a moment, an inexplicable chill ran down Ethan's spine. Then Sophia's gloved hand slipped into his, and the rest of the world faded into irrelevance. "You look," Ethan whispered, his voice catching with emotion, "like I'm about to marry the man of my dreams." Sophia finished, her eyes sparkling with mischief and profound love. Exactly like that. The ceremony passed in a blur of sacred promises and eternal vows. When asked to repeat after the minister, Ethan's voice rang clear and strong throughout the cathedral. "I, Ethan, take you, Sophia, to be my wife, to love you, protect you, and choose you every single day for the rest of my life, in front of all these people, and especially in front of those who doubt us. I promise that our love will be stronger than any storm that comes our way." Sophia's vows nearly undid him completely. "I, Sophia, take you, Ethan, not because it's expected or convenient, but because you see me, the real me. You make me braver, kinder, and more myself than I ever thought possible. I promise to love you, not just in the easy moments, but especially when loving you requires courage and faith." When they kissed as husband and wife, the cathedral erupted in thunderous applause, but all Ethan could hear was the wild beating of his own heart and Sophia's soft sigh of contentment against his lips. The reception at the Carter estate was a study in beautiful contrasts. The gardens were magnificent. Ethan had spared no expense on cascading lights, flowing champagne fountains, and a 12-piece orchestra that played everything from classical waltzes to contemporary love songs. But while the Bennett family laughed and danced with uninhibited joy, the Carter guests mingled with careful politeness, their conversations peppered with barely concealed whispers. "She's lovely, of course," Ethan overheard Mrs. Langley saying to another society matron, her voice carrying that particular brand of upper-class condescension. "But really, what do we know about her family background? I heard her father works with his hands." Ethan's jaw tightened with protective anger, but Sophia's gentle hand on his arm steadied him before he could respond. "Let them talk," she murmured with serene confidence. "We know who we are, and more importantly, we know what we have." During their first dance to Etta James's At Last, Ethan pulled Sophia close and whispered against her ear, "Do you regret it? Marrying into this circus of judgment and expectations?" Sophia laughed, the sound like silver bells dancing on evening air. "Are you kidding? I just married my best friend and the love of my life. The rest is just noise that will fade, but what we have is forever." They swayed together in their own private world, lost in each other's eyes, until Ethan's mother materialized at his shoulder like an elegant specter. "Ethan, darling, you simply must greet the Langley family. They've been waiting quite patiently to offer their congratulations." "In a minute, Mother." "Now would be better," Eleanor insisted, her tone sharp enough to cut crystal while maintaining her public smile. Sophia squeezed Ethan's hand with understanding. "Go. I'll steal some of that divine cake while you handle your duties." As Ethan was diplomatically pulled away to schmooze with his mother's influential friends, he watched Sophia from across the torchlit garden. She was laughing with her cousins, her face radiant with genuine happiness, her voice warm and engaging as she shared stories and dreams. She looked magnificent, confident, graceful, utterly herself despite being surrounded by people who viewed her as an outsider. This was exactly why he'd fought his mother's objections for 2 years. This was why he'd threatened to elope when Eleanor suggested they wait a bit longer to ensure they were truly compatible. Sophia's authenticity in a world of calculated pretense was like oxygen to a drowning man. Near midnight, as the last guest departed in their chauffeur-driven cars, Ethan found Sophia sitting on a stone bench in his mother's meticulously maintained rose garden. Her designer shoes lay discarded beside her, her hair slightly mussed from hours of dancing, her makeup softly smudged. She was more beautiful than ever real, human, his Mrs. "Carter," he said softly, settling beside her on the cool stone. "I'm keeping Bennett professionally," she said with a playful grin that made his heart skip. "But I have to admit, I love how you say Mrs. Carter. Sophia Bennett Carter has the most beautiful ring to it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance among the roses, while classical music drifted faintly from the house, where staff were cleaning up the remnants of their perfect day. Finally, Sophia spoke with unusual gravity. "Your mother hates me." Ethan's stomach twisted with uncomfortable recognition. "She doesn't hate you, Sophia." Sophia turned to face him fully, her brown eyes serious in the moonlight. "She spent the entire reception avoiding me except when absolutely necessary. During your mother-son dance, she whispered something that made you look like you'd swallowed glass. And when I went to thank her personally for hosting such a beautiful reception, she said, 'I hope you understand the expectations that come with the Carter name. Not congratulations, not welcome to the family. Expectations.'" Ethan's hands clenched into fists of helpless frustration. "What she thinks doesn't matter. This is our life, Sophia or marriage, our future together. But she's your mother. And like it or not, she's part of our life now, too. Then she'll learn to love you like I do. How could anyone not fall in love with you?" Sophia leaned against his shoulder, and Ethan breathed in the intoxicating scent of her perfume mixed with the night-blooming jasmine. "Promise me something," she whispered with surprising intensity. "Anything in the world. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says or does or tries to convince you of, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that we chose each other freely, completely, and with our eyes wide open to every challenge ahead." Something in her tone made Ethan pull back to study her face in the silvery moonlight. "Sophia, what are you? Just promise me." "I promise with everything I am, but why does it sound like you're preparing for war?" She silenced him with a kiss that tasted like champagne and forever, and just a hint of prophetic sadness. "Because I love you, Ethan Carter. And I have a feeling we're going to need to fight for that love." As they walked hand in hand back to the house, their house now, their sanctuary, Ethan felt invincible. Let his mother disapprove. Let society whisper and judge. He had Sophia, and Sophia had him, and together they could conquer any obstacle. Neither of them noticed Eleanor watching from her bedroom window, her face carved from ice and calculation, her mind already working through the first stages of a plan that would test their love beyond imagination. In her perfectly manicured hand, she clutched the business card of a private investigator, a contact she'd dismissed months ago as unnecessary. Now, watching her son disappear into the darkness with the woman she considered a fundamental threat to everything she'd built and controlled, Eleanor Harris Carter began to plan the destruction of their happiness. But for now, in the garden where Ethan had first told Sophia he loved her, two newlyweds danced to music only they could hear, believing with every fiber of their beings that love would always be enough. They were about to discover how devastatingly wrong they could be. Chapter 2. The First Cruel Blow. 1 year and 3 months after their fairy tale wedding, Sophia Bennett Carter stood in the marble bathroom of their penthouse apartment, holding a pregnancy test with shaking hands as tears of pure joy streamed down her cheeks. 2 pink lines blazed like beacons of hope against the white plastic clear. Undeniable. Beautiful. "Ethan," she called, her voice breaking with emotion. "Ethan, come here." She heard his footsteps running down the hallway, panic evident in his pace. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" When he appeared in the doorway, his dark hair still mussed from sleep, wearing only pajama bottoms and a concerned expression, Sophia held up the test with a radiant smile that could have powered the city. "We're going to have a baby." The silence that followed lasted only heartbeats, but it felt like eternity. Then Ethan's face transformed with wonder and disbelief before he swept her into his arms, spinning her around the bathroom until they were both dizzy with laughter and tears. "Are you sure? Is it real?" He whispered against her neck, his voice rough with emotion. 2 tests, both positive. "Oh, Ethan, we're going to be parents." They had been trying for 3 months, ever since their first wedding anniversary, when they decided they were ready to expand their family. 3 months of hope and disappointment, of tracking cycles and keeping fingers crossed, of dreaming about cribs and college funds and Christmas mornings filled with children's laughter. Ethan sat her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one," he whispered, his forehead pressed against hers. "Your mama and daddy already love you so much." That morning, they called in sick to work and spent the day in bed, making lists of baby names and talking about nursery colors. Ethan ran out 3 times, once for Sophia's favorite bagels, once for prenatal vitamins, and once for a baby name book that they pored over like sacred text. "If it's a girl, I love Ava," Sophia said, curled against Ethan's chest as afternoon sunlight streamed through their bedroom windows. "Ava Carter." "It's perfect." Ethan's fingers traced gentle circles on her stomach. "And if it's a boy, your grandfather's name was Henry, right? Henry Carter?" Ethan's smile was radiant. "He would have loved you, you know. He always said the family needed someone to shake things up." "What about your mother? Should we tell her?" Ethan's expression flickered with something Sophia couldn't quite read. "Let's wait until the doctor confirms everything. You know how she is about making sure things are certain before we make announcements." Sophia nodded, though something cold settled in her stomach. She'd hoped that marriage in time might soften Eleanor's attitude toward her. But if anything, her mother-in-law had become more subtly hostile. Eleanor's criticism came wrapped in concern now. Worry about Sophia's demanding career, questions about whether she was eating properly or getting enough rest. Each comment felt like a small paper cut barely noticeable alone, but painful in accumulation. The next 6 weeks passed in a haze of morning sickness and magical anticipation. Sophia glowed with a radiance that made strangers smile at her on the street. Ethan became outrageously protective, insisting she eat breakfast every morning and take taxis instead of walking to work. They found an obstetrician, Dr. Rasadater, Emily Wong, who confirmed the pregnancy and scheduled their first ultrasound for the 8-week mark. "Everything looks perfect, doctor," Wong assured them after Sophia's first appointment. "Your hormone levels are excellent, and all your test results are normal. You're a very healthy pregnant woman." That evening, they finally decided to share their news with Eleanor. Ethan called his mother while Sophia prepared dinner, listening to his half of the conversation with growing unease. "Yes, Mother. It's confirmed. No, we haven't told anyone else yet. Of course, we'll be careful. Yes, I understand about family medical history. When Ethan hung up, his expression was troubled. How did she take it? Sophia asked, though she could guess from his tone. She's happy, of course, just worried. She wants us to use her doctor instead of Dr. Wong. Dr. Grayson. He's apparently some fertility specialist who's been treating women in our social circle for years. I like Dr. Wong. I know. I told her that, but Mother insists Dr. Grayson is the best, and she's making appointments for second opinions and genetic counseling. Ethan rubbed his temples. She just wants to make sure everything is perfect. Sophia felt that familiar chill whenever Eleanor involved herself in their lives, but she pushed it aside. This was their baby, their joy. Nothing could touch that. 3 days later, Sophia woke to cramping that felt different from the usual pregnancy discomfort. She tried to ignore it, attributing the pain to stress from a big presentation at work. But when she went to the bathroom that afternoon and saw blood, her world tilted off its axis. No, 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 she whispered, staring at the unmistakable evidence that something was wrong. Please, no. The emergency room visit was a nightmare of fluorescent lights and clinical coldness. Dr. Wong met them there, her expression grave as she performed an ultrasound that showed only an empty gestational sac where their baby should have been growing. I'm so sorry, Doctor, Wong said gently. You've experienced what we call a missed miscarriage. The pregnancy stopped developing around 6 weeks, but your body didn't recognize the loss immediately. Sophia heard the words through a fog of devastating grief. Ethan's hand gripped hers tightly, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her chest. But the tests were positive. Everything seemed fine, she whispered. Sometimes these things happen without explanation. About 15 to 20% of known pregnancies end in miscarriage, usually due to chromosomal abnormalities that are completely random. They scheduled a D and C procedure for the following day. Sophia went through the motions, signing forms, listening to instructions, nodding at explanations. But inside, she felt hollow and broken. That night, as she lay in Ethan's arms while he whispered words of comfort and love, neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across from their building, or the figure inside, making careful notes about their comings and goings. The procedure went smoothly, but the emotional recovery was brutal. Sophia took a week off work, spending her days curled on the couch, grieving for the future they'd lost. Ethan was incredibly loving and supportive, bringing her favorite foods and holding her when she cried, but she could see the grief in his eyes, too. It was during this vulnerable time that Eleanor made her move. I've made an appointment for Sophia with Dr. Grayson, she announced when she arrived at their apartment, 3 days after the miscarriage, carrying an elaborate flower arrangement and wearing an expression of perfectly calibrated sympathy. Mother, that's not necessary, Ethan began, but Eleanor held up a manicured hand. Darling, I've been doing some research. Dr. Grayson specializes in pregnancy loss and fertility issues. He can run tests to make sure nothing like this happens again. Dr. Wong said miscarriages are common. Sophia started. Of course she did. But Dr. Grayson can do genetic testing, hormone panels, check for underlying conditions that might have contributed to this tragedy. Eleanor's voice carried just the right note of concern mixed with authority. I've already spoken to him about your case. He's very interested in helping. Something about the way Eleanor said your case made Sophia's skin crawl. But grief had left her emotionally exhausted and vulnerable to anything that promised answers or prevention. I suppose a second opinion couldn't hurt, she said quietly. Dr. Grayson's office was nothing like Dr. Wong's warm, welcoming practice. Located in an expensive medical building on the Upper East Side, it felt more like a luxury hotel than a healthcare facility. Dr. Grayson himself was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and an unnaturally smooth bedside manner that set Sophia's teeth on edge. Mrs. Carter, he said, deliberately using Ethan's surname despite Sophia's correction, I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me assure you, we're going to get to the bottom of why this happened. The appointment was extensive: blood draws, physical examination, detailed questions about Sophia's medical history going back to puberty. Doctor. Grayson took copious notes, asking particularly pointed questions about her family's reproductive health. Has your mother experienced pregnancy loss? Not that I know of. Any sisters or female cousins with fertility issues? No. What about genetic disorders, diabetes, autoimmune conditions? Sophia answered honestly, no family history of significant genetic problems, no major health issues in her immediate family. But Dr. Grayson's questions made her feel like she was failing some kind of test. I'd like to run some specialized tests, he said finally. Genetic panels, hormone assays, some newer diagnostics that aren't widely available yet. It may take a few weeks to get results, but I want to be thorough. 2 weeks later, Dr. Grayson called Ethan to discuss the results. Sophia was at work presenting a marketing campaign to a major client when Ethan's call came through. Sophia, you need to come home now. The tone of his voice made her blood freeze. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Just come home, please. She found Ethan pacing their living room like a caged animal, his face pale and stricken. In his hands was a manila folder thick with medical documents. Ethan, you're scaring me. What's going on? He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her world tilt. Pity, confusion, and underneath it all, the first seeds of doubt. Dr. Grayson called with your test results. Ethan's voice broke. Why didn't you tell me about your medical history? What medical history? I told Dr. Grayson everything about the fertility treatments you had before we met, about the previous pregnancy losses, about the diagnosis. Sophia stared at him in complete bewilderment. Ethan, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never had fertility treatments or pregnancy losses. You know my complete medical history. Ethan opened the folder with trembling hands. It's all here. Records from a clinic in Chicago showing you underwent fertility treatments at 23, 2 previous miscarriages before we met, and a diagnosis of he swallowed hard, recurrent pregnancy loss syndrome with possible genetic factors. That's impossible. Sophia snatched the documents from his hands, scanning pages of medical jargon and test results that made no sense. Ethan, these aren't real. I've never been to a clinic in Chicago. I've never had fertility treatments. The only pregnancy I've ever had was ours. Dr. Grayson says you might have blocked out the trauma. That sometimes women suppress memories of pregnancy loss because it's too painful. That's insane. Sophia's voice rose to near hysteria. I would remember something like that. These documents are fake, or they're for someone else, or your name is on them. Your social security number. Your address from when you lived in Chicago during graduate school. Sophia stared at the papers, her hands shaking, the official-looking letterhead, the detailed medical terminology, the impossibly specific information. It looked real, but she knew with absolute certainty that none of it was true. Ethan, you have to believe me. I have never seen these documents before in my life. I have never had fertility treatments. This is some kind of mistake, or Dr. Grayson also found genetic markers that explain the miscarriage. Apparently, it's likely to happen again unless you undergo specialized treatment. Stop. Sophia dropped the papers as if they were on fire. Just stop. None of this is real. I don't know why Dr. sent. Grayson has these fake documents or why he's telling you these lies, but I know my own medical history. Ethan looked at his wife, the woman he loved more than life itself, and saw either a woman in denial about traumatic memories or someone desperately lying to cover up a devastating deception. Dr. Grayson's words echoed in his mind. Some women avoid their fertility issues from partners because they're afraid of being rejected. The trauma of previous losses can cause psychological barriers that manifest as denial or selective amnesia. Sophia, if you're embarrassed about the fertility issues, you don't have to be. We can work through this together. There are no fertility issues. Sophia screamed, her composure finally cracking completely. I am not in denial. I am not suppressing traumatic memories. These documents are lies. But even as she said it, she could see doubt creeping into Ethan's eyes, doubt planted by a master manipulator who understood exactly how to exploit a man's love for his wife, turning it into a weapon that would destroy them both. In her penthouse across town, Eleanor Harris Carter poured herself a glass of vintage champagne and reviewed the forged medical documents that had cost her $50,000 to create. Every detail was perfect, from the clinic letterhead to the genetic test results that painted Sophia as a woman with serious fertility problems who had lied about her medical history. Dr. Grayson had played his part perfectly, expressing just the right amount of professional concern mixed with gentle suggestions that Sophia might be psychologically suppressing traumatic memories. Phase 1 was complete. The seeds of doubt were planted. Now all Eleanor had to do was water them with patience and watch as her son's marriage died from the inside out. Sophia spent that night sobbing in Ethan's arms, begging him to believe her, while Ethan held her and wondered if the woman he'd married had been lying to him from the very beginning. Neither of them realized that their first real crisis had been carefully orchestrated by the one person who should have supported their love, but instead had chosen to destroy it. Chapter 3. Seeds of Medical Deception. 2 weeks after the devastating revelation of Sophia's supposed hidden medical history, Ethan sat in Dr. Grayson's opulent office, struggling to reconcile the woman he'd married with the complex medical files spread across the mahogany desk. The afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows felt harsh and exposing. "I appreciate you coming in alone, Ethan," Dr. Grayson said, his voice carrying professional gravitas. "Given the sensitive nature of Sophia's condition, I thought it best to discuss the psychological aspects privately." "Psychological aspects?" Ethan's stomach clenched. "I thought we were dealing with fertility issues." Dr. Grayson leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "The two are more connected than most people realize. Sophia's medical history shows a pattern I've seen before: repeated pregnancy loss followed by psychological displacement." "I don't understand." "When a woman experiences multiple miscarriages, the trauma can manifest in dangerous ways. Some women develop what we call phantom pregnancy syndrome, the ability to convince themselves they're pregnant when they're not." Ethan felt the room grow cold. "Phantom pregnancy?" Women who desperately want children but have experienced repeated loss sometimes develop the psychological ability to manufacture pregnancy symptoms. The mind is incredibly powerful when driven by desperate need. Dr. Grayson opened a medical journal and turned it toward Ethan. "This study shows the pattern clearly. Women with recurrent pregnancy loss can develop elaborate methods to produce false positive pregnancy tests." Ethan's hands shook as he stared at the clinical study. "Are you saying Sophia faked being pregnant?" "Not consciously. That's what makes this condition so tragic. The woman truly believes she's pregnant. Her body may even manifest symptoms: missed periods, nausea, breast tenderness. It's a psychological defense mechanism against trauma." "But Dr. Wong confirmed the pregnancy. The ultrasound showed a gestational sac." "Yes, but no fatal heartbeat, no actual embryo." Sophia's body attempted to create a pregnancy that was never viable. Combined with her psychological need to be pregnant, she interpreted early signs as confirmation when the reality was quite different. Dr. Grayson pulled out another file. "I've been researching Sophia's case extensively. The pattern is textbook: early fertility trauma, hidden medical history, and now this pseudocesis episode." "I'm afraid so." "And Ethan, women with this condition often become increasingly desperate. The episodes can become more frequent, more elaborate. They may go to great lengths to convince their partners that their phantom pregnancies are real." Ethan stared at the documents, his world tilting. "What do I do?" "Approach this with compassion. Sophia isn't lying maliciously. She genuinely believes her mind's fabrications, but she needs psychiatric intervention, possibly medication to regulate her hormones and psychological state. She'll never agree to see a psychiatrist. That's part of the condition. Denial is a core component. Women with pseudocesis often become hostile when confronted with reality." Dr. Grayson leaned forward. "Ethan, some women with this condition have been known to fake elaborate pregnancies lasting months. Others have attempted to steal infants from hospitals. Sophia needs help before this escalates." "You think she could become dangerous?" "I think she needs professional help immediately, and you need to be prepared for another pregnancy soon. The condition tends to cycle." Ethan left Dr. Grayson's office clutching medical studies about pseudocysis and a list of recommended psychiatrists. The walk home felt like a journey through quicksand. Sophia was in their kitchen when he arrived, humming softly as she prepared dinner. She looked beautiful and normal, which somehow made everything worse. "How was your appointment?" she asked without looking up. "Fine," Ethan lied, sliding the folder under mail before she could see it. "Did he say anything about when we might try again?" The question felt loaded with hidden meaning. Was she already planning her next episode? "He thinks we should wait. Let your body recover completely." That night, as Sophia slept peacefully beside him, Ethan lay awake reading the medical studies. Each case seemed to describe his wife with horrifying accuracy. Intelligent, successful women who developed elaborate pregnancy fantasies as coping mechanisms. 2 months passed in uneasy peace. Sophia threw herself into work, accepting a promotion requiring longer hours. Ethan told himself this was healthy, a sign she was moving past the pregnancy loss. Then came the morning that shattered his fragile hope. Ethan woke to find Sophia sitting on their bed, holding something with pure radiance on her face. His blood ran cold before she turned to show him 3 pregnancy tests, all positive. "Ethan," she whispered, tears streaming, "it happened again. We're having a baby." The joy in her voice was heartbreaking in its sincerity. Looking at her glowing face, Ethan felt his world split in two. Half of him wanted to celebrate this miracle. The other half, poisoned by weeks of medical studies and Dr. Grayson's warnings, saw only a woman in the grip of another psychological episode. "Are you sure?" he managed. "I took 3 tests. They're all positive." Sophia's smile was radiant, trusting. "I know we said we'd wait, but it just happened naturally." Ethan looked at the pregnancy tests, remembering Dr. Grayson's words about false positives and hormone manipulation. "We should see Dr. Grayson right away. I'd rather see Dr. Wong again. Dr. Grayson specializes in cases like yours. He'll know exactly what to look for." Something flickered across Sophia's face, confusion or hurt. "Cases like mine? What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. After the miscarriage, he's familiar with your situation." Sophia studied his face. "You don't believe me?" "Of course I believe you." "No, you don't. You think I'm making this up?" She stopped, eyes widening with understanding. "That's it, isn't it? Dr. Grayson told you something." "What did he say?" Ethan felt trapped between love for Sophia and medical evidence, suggesting she was suffering from a serious psychological condition. "He's concerned about your mental state after the miscarriage." The silence was deafening. Sophia stared at him as if he'd slapped her, the pregnancy tests falling from her trembling hands. "You think I'm insane?" "I think you're hurting and maybe not thinking clearly." "You think I'm faking this pregnancy?" "Dr. Grayson showed me studies about women who develop phantom pregnancies after loss. It's a real condition, Sophia. It doesn't make you crazy, but it means you need help." Sophia stood slowly, her face cycling through emotions: hurt, anger, disbelief, and finally cold fury. "Get out, Ethan." "Sophia, get out," she screamed. "Get out of our bedroom and don't come back until you remember that I'm your wife, not some psychiatric case study." Ethan gathered his clothes with shaking hands. As he closed the door behind him, he thought he heard her whisper, "I'm pregnant. I'm really pregnant. Why won't you believe me?" Sophia spent that day taking pregnancy test after pregnancy test, each confirming what her body knew. She was carrying Ethan's child, but with each positive result, the doubt Ethan had planted grew stronger. By evening, Sophia had convinced herself to make an appointment with Dr. Wong for confirmation. But when she called, she was told her medical records had been transferred to Dr. Grayson at her family's request. Sophia hung up with trembling hands, finally understanding she was trapped in a web she couldn't see, fighting an enemy who knew exactly how to use her husband's love against her. The war for her marriage and her sanity had officially begun. Chapter 4. The pregnancy that wasn't believed. 3 weeks after Ethan had walked out of their bedroom, Sophia sat in the waiting room of Dr. Grayson's practice, her hands protectively cradling a belly that had begun to show the first subtle signs of pregnancy. She'd finally agreed to see Ethan's preferred doctor, desperate to prove her pregnancy was real and restore some peace to their crumbling marriage. Ethan sat beside her, but the distance between them felt like an ocean. He'd moved into the guest room temporarily, claiming he needed space to process everything Dr. Grayson had told him about her condition. Every morning, Sophia woke, hoping to see understanding in his eyes, only to find the same careful clinical observation that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. Mrs. Carter, the nurse called, deliberately using Ethan's surname despite Sophia's repeated corrections. Doctor. Grayson's examination room felt more like an interrogation chamber than a medical facility. The lighting was harsh and clinical, designed to expose rather than comfort. Doctor. Grayson himself greeted them with the sort of professional sympathy typically reserved for a terminal diagnosis. Sophia, Ethan, thank you for coming in. I know this must be a difficult time for both of you. Sophia tried to smile, though something about Dr. Grayson's manner set her teeth on edge. I'm just hoping we can get some clarity. I know my body. And I know I'm pregnant. Of course you do, Doctor. Grayson said, with the sort of gentle condescension that made Sophia want to scream. That's exactly what we're here to explore. The examination was extensive and invasive in ways that felt unnecessary. Doctor. Grayson drew what seemed like pints of blood, performed an ultrasound that he positioned so neither Sophia nor Ethan could see the screen clearly, and asked detailed questions about Sophia's emotional state, sleep patterns, and eating habits. Have you been experiencing any unusual stress lately? He asked, making notes in a file that seemed impossibly thick for someone he'd only seen twice. Well, my husband thinks I'm having a psychological breakdown, so that's been fairly stressful. Sophia replied with more sharpness than she'd intended. Doctor. Grayson's expression remained professionally neutral. And how are you coping with that stress? Any changes in appetite? Unusual cravings? Nausea? I have morning sickness, if that's what you're asking, which is perfectly normal for someone who's pregnant. Certainly, though stress can manifest in physical symptoms that closely mimic pregnancy, the mind-body connection is remarkably powerful. After the examination, Dr. Grayson asked to speak with Ethan privately. Sophia waited in the reception area, watching other pregnant women with their partners, all of them glowing with shared joy and anticipation. None of them looked like they were fighting for their sanity or their marriage. In his office, Dr. Grayson showed Ethan the ultrasound images on his computer screen. I'm afraid my suspicions were correct, he said gravely. There's no viable pregnancy here. Ethan stared at the grainy black and white images, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. But she's been having morning sickness. Her body is changing. All perfectly explicable by the condition I described. Look here. Doctor. Grayson pointed to areas on the ultrasound that meant nothing to Ethan. This is Sophia's uterus. As you can see, it's completely empty. No gestational sac, no fetal development, nothing that would indicate pregnancy. Then why are the pregnancy tests positive? Doctor. Grayson pulled out a vial of Sophia's blood. We ran comprehensive hormone panels. Sophia's HCG levels are elevated, but not from pregnancy. She's been taking fertility medications, black market hormones that can trigger false positive pregnancy tests, and even some pregnancy symptoms. Ethan felt the room spin around him. She's been taking drugs? I found traces of clomiphene and injectable HCG in her system. These are powerful fertility drugs that shouldn't be taken without medical supervision. They can cause exactly the symptoms Sophia's experiencing: nausea, breast tenderness, even missed periods and weight gain. Where would she get those drugs? The internet, unfortunately. There's a thriving black market for fertility medications. Women desperate to get pregnant sometimes resort to self-medication, not understanding the psychological and physical risks. Doctor. Grayson opened another file. I also had a colleague of mine, Dr. Margaret Evans, a reproductive psychiatrist, review Sophia's case based on my notes. Her assessment is quite concerning. He handed Ethan a document with official letterhead from a psychiatric practice. The evaluation, supposedly based on Dr. Grayson's observations and Sophia's medical history, painted a devastating picture of a woman suffering from severe psychological disturbance related to reproductive trauma. Probable pseudochesis with medication-induced symptomatology, Ethan read aloud, the clinical language making everything sound more real and terrifying. Significant risk of escalation without immediate intervention. Dr. Evans recommends immediate psychiatric evaluation and possible inpatient treatment. Sophia's condition is deteriorating, and she's now engaging in potentially dangerous self-medication. Ethan's hands shook as he read the psychiatric assessment. Every symptom seemed to match what he'd observed. Sophia's insistence that she was pregnant despite medical evidence to the contrary. Her hostility when confronted with reality. Her apparent ability to manufacture physical symptoms of pregnancy. What do I do? We need to confront her together. Show her the evidence. Make it clear that she needs professional help before this escalates further. When they returned to the examination room, Sophia was sitting on the table with her shirt lifted slightly. Her hand resting on the small curve of her belly. She looked up hopefully when they entered. Well, did the ultrasound show everything is okay? Grayson and Ethan exchanged glances. Sophia, doctor. Grayson began carefully. We need to discuss the test results. Something in his tone made Sophia's smile falter. What's wrong? Is the baby okay? Sophia, there is no baby. The words hit her like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Of course there's a baby. I can feel it. My body is changing. The pregnancy tests are giving false positives because of the medication you've been taking. Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. Sophia, doctor. Grayson found fertility drugs in your blood. Sophia stared at him in complete bewilderment. Fertility drugs? I'm not taking any medication except prenatal vitamins. Clomiphene and HCG injections. Dr. Grayson said, consulting his notes. Powerful hormones that can mimic pregnancy symptoms and trigger false positive tests. That's impossible. I've never heard of those drugs. I certainly haven't taken them. Doctor. Grayson showed her the blood work results, pointing to elevated hormone levels that meant nothing to Sophia but looked official and damning. The evidence is quite clear. Your HCG levels are artificially elevated, and there's no pregnancy visible on the ultrasound. Then something's wrong with your equipment or your tests. Sophia's voice rose with panic. I know my own body. I know I'm pregnant. Sophia, Ethan said softly, moving closer to the examination table. Doctor, Grayson also had a psychiatrist review your case. She thinks you're having a psychological episode related to our miscarriage. Sophia felt the world tilt around her. A psychiatrist? You had me evaluated by a psychiatrist without my knowledge or consent? You need help, Ethan continued, his eyes pleading. This isn't your fault, but you're not thinking clearly. The pregnancy isn't real. Get away from me, Sophia screamed, jumping down from the examination table. Both of you. I don't know what sick game you're playing, but I am pregnant. These tests are wrong or fake, or someone is lying. Sophia, please, doctor. Grayson interrupted with professional calm. I understand this is difficult to accept, but denial is a common symptom of your condition. The sooner we get you proper treatment, I don't have a condition. I'm pregnant with my husband's child, and if you can't see that on your ultrasound, then you're either incompetent or lying. Sophia grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but Ethan caught her arm. Sophia, wait. We can work through this together. She turned to face him, and Ethan was shocked by the raw anguish in her eyes. You really believe them? You actually think I'm making this up? I think you're sick. I think you need help. But I love you, and we can get through this. I'm not sick. And I'm not crazy. I'm pregnant, Ethan. I'm carrying our children. Children? Doctor. Grayson interjected. As in plural, triplets, Sophia said defiantly. I'm pregnant with triplets. I can feel them moving. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan and Doctor. Grayson exchanged looks that clearly said this was worse than they'd thought. Sophia, Doctor, Grayson said gently, at this stage of pregnancy, fetal movement wouldn't be detectable yet. What you're feeling is likely intestinal gas or muscle spasms caused by the hormonal medication. You're wrong. You're all wrong. Sophia's voice broke with the weight of her isolation. I don't know why you're doing this to me, but I know what I know. She left the office in tears, Ethan calling after her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't face the man who'd promised to love and protect her, but now looked at her like she was mentally ill. At home, Sophia stood in front of their bedroom mirror, studying her reflection. Her breasts were tender and full. Her belly had begun to curve outward, and she felt the familiar fatigue of early pregnancy. Every physical sign confirmed what she knew to be true. But doubt, like poison, had begun to seep into her certainty. Could she be wrong? Could grief have broken her mind so completely that she was imagining an entire pregnancy? She called her sister Lily, desperate for someone to believe her. "Lily, I need you to tell me the truth. Do I look pregnant to you?" "Sophia, what kind of question is that? Of course you look pregnant. You're glowing. Your face is fuller, and you definitely have a little bump. Why would you ask me that? Ethan thinks I'm having a psychological breakdown. His mother's doctor says I'm not really pregnant. That's insane. I can see you're pregnant. Mom can see it. Everyone at work has been asking when you're due." The conversation with Lily helped restore some of Sophia's confidence, but when Ethan came home that evening, the doubt returned. He looked at her belly with clinical detachment, as if he were observing a symptom rather than their growing child. "I made an appointment with Dr. Evans," he said quietly. "She's the psychiatrist Dr. Grayson recommended." "I'm not seeing a psychiatrist. Sophia, please, just one appointment. If she confirms that you're thinking clearly, then we'll get a second opinion on the pregnancy. And if she thinks I need help, then what? You'll have me committed?" Ethan's silence was answer enough. Over the following weeks, Sophia's belly continued to grow. But Ethan became increasingly convinced that he was watching his wife's psychological condition deteriorate. Dr. Grayson provided a steady stream of evidence: blood tests showing artificially elevated hormones, psychiatric evaluations describing progressive delusion, even security camera footage that supposedly showed Sophia purchasing fertility drugs online. Each piece of evidence was carefully crafted lies, but to Ethan, consumed with worry and manipulated by experts, it painted a devastating picture of his wife's mental breakdown. Sophia, meanwhile, felt increasingly isolated and desperate. Her own doctor's records had been transferred to Dr. Grayson, making it impossible to get independent confirmation of her pregnancy. Friends and family saw her obvious pregnancy symptoms, but Ethan's doubt was so pervasive that she began to question her own perceptions. The breaking point came when Sophia, now clearly showing at 4 months pregnant, tried to take Ethan's hand and place it on her belly so he could feel the babies moving. "Ethan, please, just touch my belly. Feel how hard it is, how much it's grown. Feel them moving." Ethan looked at his wife's rounded stomach, which Dr. Grayson had explained was bloating and weight gain caused by hormonal medication and psychological stress, and felt only pity for her deteriorating condition. "Sophia, what I feel doesn't matter. The ultrasounds show no pregnancy. The blood work shows artificial hormones. The psychiatrist says you're having an elaborate delusion. Then they're all lying. Or maybe someone is paying them to lie." Sophia's desperation made her sound paranoid, which only confirmed Ethan's worst fears about her mental state. "Who would do that? Why would anyone want to convince you that you're not pregnant?" Sophia looked at her husband, the man who'd once promised to trust her always, and realized with devastating clarity that she'd lost him completely. Eleanor's manipulation was so thorough, so expertly executed, that Ethan couldn't see the truth even when it was growing visibly before his eyes. "Your mother," she whispered. "Don't be ridiculous. Mother wants grandchildren more than anyone." But as Sophia said it, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she was right. Somehow, Eleanor Harris Carter had orchestrated this entire nightmare, turning Sophia's pregnancy into evidence of mental illness and weaponizing Ethan's love against their marriage. The question was, how could she prove it before Ethan destroyed their family completely? That night, as Ethan slept in the guest room and Sophia lay alone in their bed with her hands on her growing belly, she felt her 3 children moving and made them a promise. "I don't know how, but I'm going to protect you. No matter what your father believes, no matter what lies they tell, I will not let them take you away from me." But even as she whispered those words, Sophia knew that the war for her family was only beginning, and she was fighting an enemy who held all the weapons while her greatest ally, her husband, had been turned against her. In her penthouse, Eleanor Harris Carter reviewed Dr. Grayson's latest report with satisfaction. Ethan was completely convinced of Sophia's psychological instability, and Sophia was becoming increasingly isolated and desperate, exactly as planned. Soon, it would be time for the final phase, having Sophia committed to a psychiatric facility where she could safely give birth to the children Eleanor would raise as her own. While Ethan mourned the wife he believed he'd lost to mental illness, The trap was almost complete. Chapter 5. When Love Becomes Disbelief. The intervention was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November, when Sophia was 5 months pregnant and showing so obviously that strangers on the street smiled and asked about her due date. But the three people sitting in their living room, Ethan, Dr. Grayson, and Dr. Margaret Evans, the psychiatrist looked at her rounded belly and saw only evidence of psychological breakdown. Sophia, Doctor. Evans began, her voice carrying the professional gentleness reserved for the mentally unstable. We're here because we care about you and want to help you get better. Sophia looked around the room at the faces of people who claimed to love her but believed she was insane. Ethan sat rigid with anguish, dark circles under his eyes from weeks of sleepless nights. Dr. Grayson maintained his clinical mask of professional concern. Dr. Evans, a severe woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair, observed Sophia like a fascinating specimen. I don't need help, Sophia said, her hands protectively cradling her belly. I need my husband to believe that I'm carrying his children. Sophia, Ethan's voice cracked with pain, please, just listen to what Dr. Evans has to say. She specializes in cases like yours. Cases like mine? What exactly is my case, Ethan? Dr. Evans consulted a thick file. You're suffering from pseudocyesis, false pregnancy, complicated by medication-induced hormonal imbalances, and developing paranoid ideation. Paranoid ideation? Your belief that people are conspiring against you, your insistence that medical evidence is fabricated, your growing hostility toward anyone who questions your delusion. Sophia felt rage and desperation roar in her chest. It's not a delusion. I'm pregnant. Look at me. She stood and pulled her sweater tight against her belly, showing the clear curve of pregnancy. How can you look at this and tell me it's psychological? Pseudocasis can cause significant abdominal distension, Dr. Evans explained with clinical detachment. Combined with weight gain from hormonal medication and stress, the physical changes can be quite convincing. I have morning sickness. I'm exhausted. My breasts are tender. I can feel the babies moving. All symptoms that can be caused by the fertility drugs you've been taking, Dr. Grayson interjected. Sophia, we've found evidence of continued drug use. Your hormone levels are dangerously elevated. I'm not taking any drugs. Sophia turned to Ethan, pleading. Ethan, you know me. Have you ever seen me take mysterious medications? Have you ever found pills or syringes? Ethan's silence was devastating. Finally, he spoke, barely above a whisper. You could be hiding them. Doctor, Grayson says women with your condition often become very secretive. The words hit Sophia like physical blows. Her husband now believed she was capable of elaborate deception and self-harm. I see, she said with deadly quiet. So, in addition to being delusional, I'm also a liar and a drug addict. Sophia, you're sick, Ethan pleaded. That doesn't make you a bad person, but you need treatment before this gets worse. Worse? How could it get worse? Doctor. Evans leaned forward. Women with untreated pseudocasis sometimes progress to more dangerous behaviors. Self-harm to simulate pregnancy complications. In extreme cases, violence toward family members who threaten their delusion. Sophia stared at the psychiatrist in disbelief. You think I might become violent? I think you're exhibiting increasingly paranoid and delusional thinking. Your reality testing is severely compromised. The evidence is fabricated, and that, Dr. Evans said with satisfaction, is exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that concerns us. Sophia felt trapped in a nightmare where logic had been turned inside out. Every rational response was twisted into evidence of irrationality. Every protest was proof of delusion. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking. We want you to agree to voluntary admission to a specialized facility where you can get the help you need, Dr. Evans said. Somewhere safe, where we can monitor your medication withdrawal and begin intensive therapy. You want to lock me up. We want to treat your condition before it progresses to a point where you might hurt yourself or others. Sophia looked at Ethan, searching his face for any sign of the man who'd once promised to love and protect her. And if I refuse, then we'll pursue involuntary commitment, Dr. Evans said matter-of-factly. Based on your psychiatric evaluation and medical evidence, I believe any judge would agree that you pose a danger to yourself. The room fell silent except for Sophia's ragged breathing. She understood now that this had always been the planet treatment, but removal. Eleanor had orchestrated this elaborate scheme, not just to destroy Sophia's marriage, but to eliminate her completely. "I need time to think," Sophia said finally. "Of course, Doctor," Evans agreed. "But Sophia, every day you remain in this delusional state makes recovery more difficult." After the others left, Sophia and Ethan sat in crushing silence. Outside, snow had begun to fall, covering their garden in pristine white. "Do you remember," she said softly, "when we talked about having children? How you said you wanted a little girl with my eyes and my stubbornness?" Ethan's voice was thick with unshed tears. "Sophia, you said you couldn't wait to feel our baby kick. You bought that pregnancy book and read ahead constantly." Sophia's hand moved over her belly. "They're moving right now, Ethan. All three of them. Our children are alive and growing inside me. And you're convinced I'm insane. I'm convinced you need help from the same people telling you I'm not pregnant. The same doctor who works for your mother." Ethan flinched. "This has nothing to do with my mother, doesn't it? Isn't it convenient that I developed this mysterious condition right after we got married? Isn't it odd that your mother's doctor is the only one who can diagnose it? Now you're conspiracy theorizing about my mother." Sophia stood abruptly, her belly clearly visible. "I'm 5 months pregnant. I've gained 25 pounds. I have a pronounced belly. I haven't had a period in 5 months. Are you telling me all of this is psychological?" Ethan looked at his wife, and for a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. She certainly appeared pregnant. But Dr. Grayson's explanations echoed in his mind. "The medical tests are wrong or fabricated." Sophia's voice broke. "I'm talking about the woman who has orchestrated this entire nightmare. My mother is not responsible for your mental breakdown." The words hung between them like a blade. Sophia stared at her husband and saw a stranger, someone so thoroughly poisoned against her that he couldn't see the truth even when it was growing before his eyes. "Get out," she whispered. "Sophia, get out," she screamed. "Get out of this house, and don't come back until you remember that I'm your wife, not your patient." Ethan left that night, moving back to his childhood room at the Carter estate. Eleanor welcomed him with open arms and gentle sympathy, offering comfort while subtly reinforcing Dr. Grayson's diagnosis. "I know this is difficult, darling," she said, "but you're doing the right thing. Sophia needs professional help, and sometimes the kindest thing we can do is force them to get treatment." 3 days before Sophia planned to escape the city, Dr. Evans arrived at her door with 2 police officers and a court order for involuntary psychiatric commitment. "I'm sorry, Sophia," Dr. Evans said with false sympathy, "but your condition has deteriorated to the point where we can't allow you to remain unsupervised." As the officers gently but firmly escorted Sophia to the waiting ambulance, she caught sight of Ethan watching from a black sedan parked across the street. Their eyes met through the window, and she saw something that broke her heart completely: relief. At the psychiatric facility, Sophia was strip-searched, given institutional clothing, and placed in a room with padded walls. When she demanded an independent medical examination to prove her pregnancy, she was told such requests required approval from her attending physician, Dr. Grayson. 2 weeks into her confinement, Ethan came to visit. He sat across from her in the sterile visiting room, looking haggard and guilty. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Sophia, fighting through the psychiatric medication fog, looked at the man she'd once planned to grow old with. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. No matter what they've told you, I am carrying your children." "Sophia, please," she said quietly. "I forgive you. I forgive you for not believing me. I forgive you for having me committed. I even forgive you for choosing your mother over your wife. But I will never forgive you for abandoning our children." Ethan left that day and didn't return. 3 weeks later, his lawyer served Sophia with divorce papers while she sat in her padded room, 6 months pregnant and completely alone. The grounds for divorce: irreconcilable differences due to spouse's mental incapacity. Sophia signed the papers with a steady hand, her other hand resting on her belly where 3 babies grew despite the world's insistence that they didn't exist. "Don't worry," she whispered to them. "Mama's going to find a way out of here, and when I do, we're going to show the world the truth." In her penthouse, Eleanor toasted her victory with champagne while reviewing the divorce decree. Soon, Sophia would give birth in the psychiatric facility. The children would be placed in Eleanor's custody as their only sane relative, and Ethan would never know that his wife had been telling the truth all along. It was, Eleanor reflected, a perfect plan. The truth would be buried with Sophia's reputation, and Eleanor would finally have the heirs she'd always wanted. Chapter 6. The birth that shattered everything. Sophia's labor began at Tridau Arbimthega. M. On a cold February morning, 7 weeks after she'd signed divorce papers in the psychiatric ward, and 9 months after Grayson had convinced Ethan that her pregnancy was a delusion. She woke to powerful contractions that doubled her over in the narrow hospital bed where she'd been confined for 3 months. "Help!" she gasped, pressing the call button with shaking hands. "Something's happening." The night nurse, a kind woman named Maria who'd always treated Sophia with more compassion than the doctors, rushed in to find Sophia clutching her enormous belly as another contraction ripped through her. "How far apart are the contractions?" Maria asked, immediately calling for Dr. Sullivan, the facility's chief medical officer. "I don't know. They just started." "Maria, please, the babies are coming." Even now, after months of being told she was delusional, Maria had never quite believed that Sophia's pregnancy was psychological. She'd seen too many pregnant women to mistake the signs, and Sophia's belly was rock hard and clearly full of babies. Dr. Sullivan arrived within minutes, his face grim as he examined Sophia. Unlike Dr. Grayson, who specialized in feeding Ethan lies, Dr. Sullivan was a legitimate physician who dealt in medical facts. What he found during his examination made him grab the phone immediately. "I need an obstetric team in here now," he barked into the receiver. "We have a woman in active labor, with what appears to be a multiple gestation." "What appears to be?" Sophia panted between contractions. "Doctor, I've been telling everyone for 9 months that I'm pregnant with triplets." Dr. Sullivan looked at Sophia's chart, reading months of psychiatric notes that insisted she was suffering from pseudocesis. Then he looked at the woman in front of him, obviously in the throes of very real labor. "Mrs. Bennett Carter, I need to ask you directly. Have you been pregnant this entire time?" "Yes," Sophia cried as another contraction hit. "I've been pregnant the whole time. Please, just help my babies be born safely." Within an hour, Sophia was in the delivery room, surrounded by a medical team that was scrambling to understand how a woman supposedly suffering from false pregnancy had ended up in active labor with multiples. The ultrasound machine wheeled in for the emergency revealed not 1 but 3 distinct heartbeats, 3 fully formed babies ready to be born. "How is this possible?" the attending obstetrician asked Dr. Sullivan. "Her chart says she's been committed for pseudocesis." "Someone made a massive mistake, Dr. Sullivan replied grimly. "This woman is having triplets." Sophia barely heard their confusion over the intensity of her labor. After 9 months of being told her pregnancy was imaginary, she was finally vindicated. But she was also completely alone, no husband holding her hand, no family offering support, no one to share the miracle of bringing 3 lives into the world. At 11:42 a.m., Xavier was born, weighing 6 pounds and 2 ounces, his cries filling the delivery room with triumphant sound. At 11:48 a.m., Isaiah followed, 5 pounds, 4 ounces of perfect baby boy, and at 11:53 a.m., Noah completed their family, 6 pounds even, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined chin. 3 healthy boys, the obstetrician announced, placing the babies on Sophia's chest as she sobbed with relief and joy. "Congratulations, Mama." Sophia looked down at her 3 sons reel, breathing, absolutely perfect, and felt a mixture of overwhelming love and devastating grief. They were here, they were safe, and their father wasn't here to meet them because he'd believed she was insane. "Can someone call my ex-husband?" she whispered to Maria, who was helping clean the babies. "Ethan Carter. He should know about his sons." "Are you sure, honey? After everything he put you through?" Sophia looked at her babies, thinking about how they deserved to know their father, even if their father hadn't believed they existed. "He's their daddy. They have a right to meet him." Maria made the call from the nurse's station, reaching Ethan at Carter Enterprises, where he was trying to lose himself in work and forget about the wife he had committed for her own good. "Mr. Carter, this is Maria Lopez at Hillcrest Psychiatric Hospital. I'm calling about your wife." Ethan's blood ran cold. Had Sophia hurt herself? Had her condition worsened? "What's wrong? Is she okay?" "Sir, she's just given birth to 3 healthy baby boys." The silence on the phone stretched so long that Maria wondered if the connection had been lost. "That's impossible," Ethan finally said. "Sophia wasn't pregnant. She's been committed for false pregnancy syndrome." "Mr. Carter, I'm holding one of your sons right now. Would you like to know his weight?" Ethan sat down heavily in his office chair, the room spinning around him. "You're saying she was actually pregnant?" 9 months and 2 days. 3 beautiful boys, Xavier, Isaiah, and Noah. She named them herself. Ethan hung up the phone and stared at nothing, his mind completely unable to process what he'd just heard. For 9 months, medical professionals had convinced him that his wife was delusional. For 9 months, he'd watched her belly grow and been told it was psychological swelling. For 9 months, he'd listened to her plead that she was carrying his children and been assured that her claims were elaborate fantasies. And now she'd given birth to triplets. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of conflicting emotions: disbelief, terror, hope, and a growing realization that he might have made the most catastrophic mistake of his life. When he arrived at Hillcrest, he was directed to the maternity ward, not the psychiatric wing where he'd last seen Sophia. "Doctor." Sullivan met him in the hallway, his expression serious. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk before you see your wife and children." "Children," Ethan repeated numbly. "They're real. The babies are real. Very real. 3 healthy boys born just hours ago." "Mr. Carter, I need to understand how a pregnant woman ended up committed to our psychiatric facility. According to her chart, she was diagnosed with pseudocysis, false pregnancy, but she's just delivered triplets." Ethan felt his world collapse around him. "Doctor, Grayson said she wasn't pregnant. He showed me ultrasounds, blood tests, psychiatric evaluations. He said she was taking drugs to fake pregnancy symptoms." "Who is Dr. Grayson?" "Her doctor, a fertility specialist recommended by my mother." "Dr." Sullivan's expression darkened. "Mr. Carter, your wife received no prenatal care during her pregnancy. She was given psychiatric medication that could have harmed the babies. She delivered alone because everyone believed her pregnancy was delusional. This represents a serious medical malpractice situation. But the tests, the evidence, were apparently fabricated." "Sir, I need to ask you directly. Did you have any financial incentive to have your wife committed? Any reason to want her pregnancy hidden?" "No. God, no. I thought I was helping her get treatment for a mental condition." "Doctor." Sullivan studied Ethan's face and saw genuine shock and horror. "Then, someone deceived you as thoroughly as they deceived us. Your wife has been telling the truth for 9 months, and no one believed her." When Ethan finally entered Sophia's room, he found her nursing one of the babies, while the other 2 slept in a rolling bassinet beside her bed. She looked up when he entered, and the expression on her face was one he'd never seen before, not anger or hurt, but something far worse: complete indifference. "Sophia," he whispered, approaching the bed cautiously. "2, don't know what to say. How about, I'm sorry I had you committed for being pregnant with my children." Sophia's voice was calm, emotionless. "Or maybe, I'm sorry I divorced you for telling me the truth?" Ethan stared at the babies, his sons, and felt something break inside his chest. They were perfect, obviously his children, living proof that his wife had been telling the truth for 9 months while he'd called her delusional. "Sophia, I didn't know. The doctors showed me evidence. Fake evidence. Lies. Manipulation." Sophia switched the baby to her other breast with practiced ease. "But you believed them instead of believing me, your wife, the mother of your children. I thought I was helping you. By having me locked up? By divorcing me? By abandoning me when I needed you most?" Sophia's voice remained steady, but tears began falling down her cheeks. "Ethan, I gave birth to our 3 sons alone because you thought I was crazy. They came into this world without their father because you chose to believe strangers over your wife." Ethan reached toward the babies, but Sophia shifted away. "Don't. You lost the right to touch them when you signed those divorce papers. Sophia, please. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Let me make this right." "Make it right?" Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How do you make right 9 months of thinking your wife is insane? How do you take back having her committed to a psychiatric facility while she was pregnant? How do you apologize for missing the birth of your children because you believed she was too mentally ill to know her own body?" Ethan fell to his knees beside the bed, tears streaming down his face. "I'll do anything to fix this." "You can't fix this, Ethan. You broke something that can't be repaired. You broke trust. You broke faith. You broke us." A nurse entered the room carrying legal documents. "Mrs. Bennett Carter, we need to fill out the birth certificates for the father's name." Sophia looked at Ethan, then back at the nurse. "Leave it blank for now." "Sophia, no, please. They're my sons." "Prove it." "What?" "You demanded DNA tests for 9 months, convinced I was lying about being pregnant. So, prove they're yours. Take your tests. But until you do, legally, these boys have no father." Ethan stood in the empty hospital room holding DNA results that confirmed what was obvious to anyone with eyes. All 3 boys were his biological children. But by then, Sophia had been discharged and disappeared with their sons, leaving only a note that would haunt him for years. "You got your proof. They're yours biologically. But being a father isn't about DNA. It's about faith, trust, and love. You failed all 3 tests. If you want to be part of their lives, you'll have to earn it. But you'll never be part of mine again. The man I married would have believed me. The man I married would have protected us. The man I married died the day you chose your mother's lies over your wife's truth." Ethan crumpled the letter in his shaking hands, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost, not through mental illness or medical complications, but through his own failure to trust the woman he'd promised to love and protect. In choosing his mother's lies over his wife's truth, he destroyed the most precious thing in his life. The question now was whether 8 years would be enough time for him to become worthy of a second chance, or whether some betrayals were too profound for love to survive. Chapter 7. 8 years of guilt and distance. 8 years after reading Sophia's devastating letter in that empty hospital room, Ethan Carter had learned the answer to his own question. 8 years was not nearly enough time to become worthy of a second chance, but it was exactly how long it took to understand the full magnitude of what he'd lost. Meanwhile, Sophia Bennett had transformed heartbreak into triumph. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 32nd floor of the Sullivan Building, watching the city bustle below, while reviewing quarterly reports that confirmed what everyone in the industry already knew. She'd become one of New York's most successful marketing executives. Her company, Bennett Strategies, had grown from a one-woman startup to a boutique firm commanding premium rates from Fortune 500 clients. "Mom, are you coming to my soccer game tonight?" Sophia turned from the window to find her 8-year-old son, Xavier, standing in her office doorway, still wearing his school uniform and clutching his backpack. He was tall for his age, with Ethan's dark hair and serious brown eyes that held wisdom far beyond his years. "Wouldn't miss it," Sophia said, kneeling down to adjust his tie. "Though I have to warn you, I might embarrass you by cheering too loudly." "You always embarrass us by cheering too loudly," Xavier said with a grin that transformed his serious face. "Isaiah says it's because you have to cheer for 3 kids instead of 1, so it comes out 3 times louder." Sophia laughed, pulling her eldest son into a hug. "Isaiah is very wise for an 8-year-old. Speaking of Isaiah, he's in the lobby practicing his science presentation. He made me promise to tell you it's about the molecular structure of happiness, and he needs you to be his test audience." And Noah, reading in the car, he finished his homework and moved on to that book about ancient Rome. Sophia shook her head in wonder. Her 3 sons were as different as night and day, but each brilliant in his own way. Xavier was the protector, always watching out for his brothers and thinking 3 steps ahead. Isaiah was the scientist, fascinated by how everything worked and endlessly curious about the world. Noah was the philosopher, quiet and thoughtful, with an old soul that sometimes made Sophia wonder if he understood more about life than she did. As they rode the elevator down to the lobby, Xavier asked the question Sophia had been dreading. "Mom, Oliver asked me today why we don't have the same last name as our dad." Sophia's heart clenched. At 8, the boys were old enough to notice things, ask pointed questions, and demand real answers. "What did you tell him? That you kept your name when you got married?" But then he asked why Dad doesn't live with us, and I didn't know what to say. Sophia knelt down to meet Xavier's eyes. Over the years, she'd crafted careful explanations for her sons about their father, truthful, but age-appropriate. "You know how I've told you that Daddy was confused when you were born? You said he made bad choices because he was listening to the wrong people." "That's right. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, even when they love each other. Daddy made some mistakes that hurt our family very badly. But does he want to see us?" The question cut straight to Sophia's heart. Over the 8 years since the boys were born, Ethan had made several attempts to contact them: birthday cards, Christmas presents, requests for visitation that came through lawyers. Sophia had kept every card, every gift, every letter stored in a box for the day when the boys were old enough to decide for themselves. "I think he does," she said carefully. "But it's complicated, sweetheart. Someday, when you're older, you can decide if you want to get to know him." "Okay," Xavier said, apparently satisfied. "But Mom, whatever mistakes he made, they couldn't have been worse than not getting to watch us grow up." Sophia blinked back tears, amazed by her son's insight. "You're absolutely right, baby." In the lobby, she found Isaiah practicing his presentation for anyone who would listen, his animated gestures drawing smiles from office workers. Noah sat nearby, completely absorbed in his book about Roman history. "The molecular structure of happiness," Isaiah announced as Sophia approached, "is actually a combination of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. But I think there's a fifth element that scientists haven't discovered yet." "What's that?" Sophia asked. "Love. Real love. The kind that doesn't change even when things get hard." Sophia felt her breath catch. Sometimes her children's wisdom was almost too much to bear. "That's beautiful, Isaiah, and very smart." On the drive home to their house in Brooklyn Heights, a restored brownstone that Sophia had bought when the business took off, Noah looked up from his book and asked, "Mom, do you think people can change? Like, really change, not just pretend to change?" "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "I'm reading about Julius Caesar, and he did bad things. But then later he tried to do good things, but people didn't trust him because of the bad things he'd done before." Sophia considered her answer carefully. "I think people can change, but changing and earning forgiveness are two different things. Caesar might have become a better person, but that didn't erase the hurt he'd caused. So, if someone really hurt you, even if they changed, you might not be able to forgive them. It depends on what they did and whether they understood why it was wrong. What if they understood and they were really, really sorry, and they spent years trying to make up for it?" Sophia glanced in the rearview mirror at Noah's serious face. "Are we still talking about Julius Caesar?" "Maybe," Noah said with a small smile that reminded Sophia painfully of Ethan. That evening, while the boys did homework at the kitchen table, Sophia found herself thinking about Ethan's latest letter, which had arrived the week before. Over the years, his letters had evolved from desperate pleas for forgiveness to simple updates about his life and quiet expressions of regret. This latest one had been different, more mature, more thoughtful. "Sophia, I know you don't read these letters, and I understand why, but I need to write them anyway. I've been going to therapy for 6 years now, trying to understand how I became the kind of man who could have his pregnant wife committed to a psychiatric hospital. The answer is complicated, but it boils down to this: I was weak when you needed me to be strong. I've learned things about what happened that I think you should know. Dr. Grayson fled to Brazil before he could be prosecuted, but the investigation revealed the full extent of his fraud. He was paid $200,000 by my mother to fabricate your medical records and psychiatric evaluations. The blood tests were faked. Even the ultrasounds showing no pregnancy were doctored images. I know this doesn't change anything, but I thought you deserved to know that every piece of evidence I was shown was fabricated. I've cut all contact with my mother. I understand now what she did to us, to you, to our sons, to our marriage. She destroyed everything because she couldn't bear to lose control of my life. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want our sons to know that their father loves them even if he doesn't deserve them. You've raised amazing children, Sophia. They're a testament to your strength and love. If there's ever a time when the boys want to know their father, I'll be here. All my love and regret, Ethan. Sophia had read the letter a dozen times. She'd done her research over the years, learning the full scope of what Eleanor and Dr. Grayson had done. The medical fraud was staggering in its complexity. Ethan hadn't just been lied to. He'd been the victim of an elaborate conspiracy. But knowing that didn't erase the fundamental truth. When it mattered most, he'd chosen to believe others over her. "Mom, you're staring at nothing again," Isaiah observed from the kitchen table. "Sorry, baby. Just thinking about Dad," Noah asked quietly. Sophia was constantly amazed by her children's perceptiveness. "How did you know? You get the same look when you're thinking about him that you get when you're thinking about Grandpa," Xavier said, sad but not angry. Sophia joined her sons at the table. They were right. She did miss Ethan Knott, the man who'd betrayed her trust, but the man she'd fallen in love with. "Do you want to meet him?" she asked suddenly. The question surprised even her. The boys exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that only siblings who'd shared a womb could manage. "Maybe," Xavier said carefully, "but only if you're okay with it. And only if he understands that you are our real parent," Isaiah added protectively. "And only if he doesn't try to change anything about our family," Noah concluded. Sophia looked at her sons and felt her heart swell. They were protecting her even as they expressed curiosity about their father. "Those are very good conditions," she said. "And you know what? I think I might be ready to consider it." That night, after the boys were asleep, Sophia sat in her home office and pulled out a sheet of stationery. For the first time in 8 years, she wrote a letter to Ethan Carter. "Ethan, I received your letter. All of your letters. Actually, I've read every one. I want you to know that our sons are extraordinary children. They're kind, intelligent, and have more emotional maturity than most adults. They've grown up knowing they have a father who made mistakes. They're asking questions now about why we don't live together, why they don't know you, whether you want to be part of their lives. I've told them the truth in terms they can understand, that you were confused when they were born and made choices that hurt our family. I'm not ready to forgive you. I may never be ready. What you did broke something in me that hasn't healed. But our children deserve the chance to know their father if they want to. If you're serious about being part of their lives, here are my conditions. Any relationship you have with them goes through me. You respect the life I've built for them. You don't make excuses about your mother's manipulation. If they decide they don't want a relationship with you, you respect that choice. This isn't about us. It's about them. If you can accept these terms, I'll consider arranging a meeting. But Ethan, if you hurt them the way you hurt me, I'll make sure you never see them again. Sophia. P.S. Xavier plays soccer and wants to be an engineer. Isaiah loves science and wants to cure diseases. Noah reads constantly and wants to be a historian. Sophia sealed the letter before she could change her mind, addressing it to Ethan's office at Carter Enterprises. Tomorrow she would mail it, and then she would wait to see if the man who'd once destroyed her faith and love had learned anything about being worthy of their children's trust. She had no idea that across town, Ethan sat in his empty penthouse apartment, surrounded by 8 years' worth of school photos, report cards, and birthday cards he'd never been allowed to give. On his desk was a letter he'd written but never sent, asking Sophia for exactly what she was about to offer him. A chance to know his sons. Neither of them knew that the next morning would bring a phone call that would change everything, forcing long-buried truths into the light and setting in motion the final chapter of their fractured love story. Chapter 8. When Truth Demands Its Due. The phone call that would change everything came at 2:47 a.m. The morning after Sophia had mailed her letter, as if fate had decided 8 years of separation was enough. Ethan woke to his phone, buzzing insistently on the nightstand, the caller ID showing Mercy General Hospital. "Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Elizabeth Nguyen from Mercy General. Your mother, Eleanor Harris Carter, was brought in an hour ago. She's asking for you." Ethan sat up in bed, instantly alert despite the late hour. "What happened? Is she okay? She collapsed at a charity gala. We're running tests, but she's stable now. Mr. Carter, she's asked me to tell you that she needs to speak with you urgently. She says there are things you need to know, and she's quite insistent that it can't wait." 20 minutes later, Ethan stood outside his mother's hospital room, hesitating before entering. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since the day he'd learned the full extent of her manipulation and walked out of her life forever. But the woman lying in the hospital bed looked nothing like the formidable Eleanor Harris Carter who had orchestrated the destruction of his marriage. She appeared fragile, diminished, her perfectly styled hair mussed against the hospital pillows, her face pale without its usual armor of expensive makeup. When she saw him, tears immediately filled her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered. "You came. The hospital called. They said you were asking for me. I have cancer." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "Doctor, Wynne said you collapsed. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I've known for 2 months. The doctors say I have months, maybe a year with treatment. But Ethan, that's not why I called you here." Ethan sank into the chair beside her bed, his emotions a chaotic mixture of grief, anger, and confusion. Despite everything she'd done, she was still his mother. "I called you here because I might not have much time left and I can't live with these secrets anymore. You need to know the truth about what I did to Sophia. All of it. I already know what you did." "No," Eleanor said with surprising strength. "You know some of it. You know about Dr. Grayson and the forged medical records. But you don't know how extensive it was." Eleanor reached into the drawer of her hospital bedside table with trembling hands and pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been carrying this for 8 years, waiting for the courage to show you." She handed him the envelope, and Ethan's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were dozens of documents, financial records showing payments to Dr. Grayson totaling over $300,000, contracts with private investigators, detailed plans for psychological manipulation, and photographs. The photographs made Ethan's stomach turn. They showed Sophia during her pregnancy, taken with telephoto lenses from across streets and through windows pictures of her at doctor appointments, at work, buying maternity clothes. There were dozens of them, documenting her every move during the 9 months when everyone believed she was having a psychological breakdown. "You had her followed," Ethan said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "I documented everything. Every doctor's appointment she tried to make, that we blocked. Every pregnancy symptom she exhibited that we explained away." Eleanor pulled out another set of documents. "These are the real ultrasound images from her pregnancy. Dr. Grayson took them during her appointments but showed you the doctored ones instead." With shaking hands, Ethan examined ultrasound photos that clearly showed 3 babies at various stages of development. Date stamps proved they were taken during Sophia's supposed phantom pregnancy. In one image, he could see tiny hands and feet. In another, 3 distinct heartbeats were visible. "You knew," Ethan whispered, "the entire time. You knew she was really pregnant." "I knew she was carrying triplets by her 12-week appointment. I knew they were healthy and developing normally. I knew she was telling you the truth about everything." "Then why?" Ethan's voice shattered completely. "Why did you destroy her? Why did you destroy us?" Eleanor closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Because I was terrified of losing you. Because Sophia was strong and independent and made you happy in ways I couldn't control. Because she represented everything I wasn't. Authentic, loving, selfless. So you had her committed to a psychiatric facility while she was pregnant with your grandchildren. I convinced myself I was protecting you from making a mistake. But the truth is, I was jealous. I was a bitter, controlling woman who couldn't bear to see my son love someone more than he loved me." Ethan stared at the evidence of his mother's elaborate deception, each document a testament to the systematic destruction of his family. "Do you have any idea what you did? Sophia gave birth to our children alone because of you. My sons don't know their father exists because of you. I know. And Ethan, there's more." Eleanor reached for another folder, this one containing correspondence between her and Dr. Grayson. As Ethan read, he learned that the plan had been even more sinister than he'd realized. "You were going to take the babies," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "After Sophia gave birth in the psychiatric facility, you were going to claim custody of them. Dr. Grayson was going to declare Sophia permanently, mentally incompetent. I would have been appointed guardian of the children as their only stable relative. You would have raised them thinking their mother was too sick to care for them. My God. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You were going to steal my children and let Sophia rot in a mental institution. Yes. The simple acknowledgement hung between them like a death sentence. Ethan turned back to face his mother, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in his life. I'll never forgive you for what you did to them. Good, Eleanor said firmly. Don't forgive me. Use your anger to fuel your fight to win them back. Use your knowledge of the truth to become the man Sophia deserved to marry. Over the following weeks, Eleanor began cancer treatment, while Ethan processed the devastating truth about what she'd done to his family. The chemotherapy was brutal, but Eleanor endured it with grim determination, as if suffering was the only penance she could offer for her crimes. Ethan visited her once during treatment, bringing the briefcase full of evidence she'd given him. I'm going to tell Sophia everything, he said. She deserves to know the full scope of what you did to her. Yes, she does. Eleanor looked fragile and diminished in her hospital bed, but her voice was clear. And Ethan, when you do tell her, make sure she understands that you were my victim too. I manipulated you as thoroughly as I manipulated everyone else. That doesn't excuse what I chose to do. No, it doesn't. But maybe it explains why a man who loved his wife completely could be convinced to abandon her when she needed him most. Ethan stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mother, if you survive this cancer, what will you do? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I'll try to find a way to make amends to the children I never met, to the woman whose life I destroyed, to you for turning you into someone you never wanted to be. It might be too late for amends. I know, but I have to try. It's the only way I can live with what I've done. 6 months later, Eleanor's doctors delivered unexpected news. The cancer was in remission. The aggressive treatment had worked, giving her a reprieve she wasn't sure she deserved. As she sat in her empty penthouse, surrounded by the wealth and status that had once meant everything to her, Eleanor realized she had a choice. She could return to her old life, pretending the cancer scare had been a wake-up call that changed nothing. Or she could use whatever time she had left to try to repair some of the damage she'd caused. Looking at a photograph of 3 beautiful grandsons she'd never met, Eleanor made her decision. It was time to face the woman whose life she'd destroyed and offer the only thing she had left. The complete, devastating truth, and an apology that could never be adequate but might at least be genuine. But first, she had to give her son the chance to use that truth to fight for his family. Tomorrow she would call Ethan and tell him that Sophia's letter had arrived at his office, the letter that would give him the opportunity he'd been waiting 8 years to receive. The question was whether it was already too late, or whether love, tested by the cruelest betrayal imaginable, could find a way to heal wounds that had scarred 3 generations. Chapter 9. Earning love back one day at a time. Eleanor called Ethan the next morning, her voice shaky but determined. There's a letter waiting for you at your office, she said without preamble. From Sophia. Ethan, this might be your chance. 2 hours later, Ethan sat in his car outside Sophia's office building, having read Sophia's letter 3 times, a briefcase full of evidence on his passenger seat, and his mother's confession echoing in his mind. Through the lobby windows, he could see her meeting with clients, animated and confident, gesturing as she explained some marketing strategy. She looked successful, strong, completely self-sufficient, nothing like the broken woman he'd had committed 8 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. Sophia had built an empire while he'd spent 8 years drowning in guilt and regret. When Sophia finally emerged from the building at 6:30 p.m., Ethan got out of his car and approached her on the sidewalk. The moment she saw him, her expression went from tired satisfaction to cold weariness. What are you doing here, Ethan? I need to talk to you. I have things you need to see. No. Sophia stepped around him toward her car. I don't need to see anything from you. Sophia, please. My mother is dead, and she told me everything before she died. I have proof of what she did to you. Sophia stopped walking but didn't turn around. Proof of what I told you 8 years ago? Proof that I was pregnant with your children while you had me locked up? Proof that I was telling the truth when you called me delusional? Yes. I don't need your proof, Ethan. I lived through it. I know what happened to me. But you don't know the extent of it. You don't know how carefully orchestrated it was, how much money was involved, how detailed the planning was. Ethan moved to stand in front of her. Sophia, she had you followed. She documented your entire pregnancy. She knew you were carrying triplets and let me believe you were mentally ill. For just a moment, pain flickered across Sophia's face. Then her expression hardened again. Of course she did. I figured that out years ago. Your mother hated me from the day we met. What I never understood was how she convinced you to choose her over me. I was weak. Yes, you were. And knowing why doesn't change that fact. Sophia reached her car and turned to face him fully. Ethan, I'm glad you finally know the truth. I hope it helps you sleep better at night. But it doesn't change anything between us. What about our sons? Don't they deserve to know their father? Our sons deserve better than they got from you. But yes, someday they might want to meet you when they're ready, when I'm ready, but not because you ambushed me outside my office with guilt and apologies. Then tell me what I need to do. Sophia studied his face for a long moment. You want to know what you need to do? Prove that you've changed, not with words or explanations or evidence about your mother's manipulation. Prove it with actions. Show me that you're worthy of being in their lives. How? Figure it out, Ethan. If you can't understand what it means to earn trust through actions instead of demanding it through explanations, then you haven't learned anything at all. Sophia got in her car and drove away, leaving Ethan standing on the sidewalk with his briefcase full of evidence that suddenly felt meaningless. She was right. Proof of his mother's deception didn't erase his own choices. Knowledge of the manipulation didn't restore the trust he'd broken. Over the following months, Ethan began what he thought of as his campaign to prove himself worthy of his family, but his first attempts were clumsy, desperate gestures that revealed how little he understood about earning forgiveness. He sent expensive gifts to Sophia's office flowers, jewelry, luxury items that she returned unopened. He made donations to charities in the boys' names, ensuring Sophia received notifications of his generosity. He hired private investigators to learn about their lives, their interests, their needs, so he could anticipate ways to help. Each gesture was returned, rejected, or ignored completely. It took 6 months of failure before Ethan realized he was still trying to control the situation instead of actually changing. He was performing acts of contrition instead of demonstrating genuine transformation. The breakthrough came during a conversation with Dr. Emily Wong, the therapist he'd been seeing since learning the truth about his mother's manipulation. You're still trying to manage the outcome, Doctor. Wong observed during one of their sessions. Every gesture you're making is designed to get a specific response from Sophia. That's manipulation, even if it's well-intentioned. Then what should I do? What would you do if you knew she would never forgive you? If you knew your sons would never want a relationship with you? How would you live then? The question stopped Ethan cold. He'd been so focused on winning back his family that he hadn't considered what it meant to simply be a better person regardless of the outcome. I don't know. That's where you need to start. Becoming someone worthy of their love, whether or not you ever receive it. Ethan began making different choices. Instead of sending gifts to Sophia, he anonymously funded scholarships at the boys' school for children whose parents couldn't afford tuition. Instead of hiring investigators to learn about their lives, he volunteered as a youth soccer coach, learning to work with children and understanding what made them feel valued and secure. He stopped sending letters explaining himself and started sending simple notes acknowledging their achievements, Xavier's soccer goals, Isaiah's science fair victories, Noah's writing awards without asking for anything in return. When Sophia's car broke down outside the boys' school one rainy afternoon, Ethan happened to be driving by after his volunteer coaching session. He pulled over and offered help, expecting rejection. Instead, Sophia accepted a ride home in exhausted defeat, her guard momentarily down. "Thank you," she said quietly as they sat in traffic. "I know you didn't have to stop." "Yes, I did. Not because I expect anything from you, but because it was the right thing to do." They rode in silence for several minutes before Sophia spoke again. "The boys ask about you sometimes." Ethan's heart lurched, but he kept his voice steady. "What do you tell them?" "The truth. That their father made terrible mistakes, but that he loves them. That someday, if they want to, they can decide whether to meet you." "And what do they say?" "They're curious, especially lately. Xavier asked if you know how to play soccer. Isaiah wants to know if you're smart enough to understand his science projects. Noah wondered if you like to read. Ethan felt tears threaten. What did you tell them? That I don't know who you are now. That the man I married might have been able to answer those questions, but you'd have to show them yourself who you've become. When they reached Sophia's house, Ethan caught a glimpse of 3 boys watching from the window his sons, who he'd never properly met, studying their father with intelligent, curious eyes. "Sophia," he said as she got out of the car, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even ask for it anymore. But if there's ever a time when you think it might be safe for them to meet me, I'll be ready." What does that mean, ready? It means I'll be someone they can count on, someone who puts their needs first, someone who earns trust instead of demanding it. Ethan looked up at the house where his children lived. It means I'll be the father they deserve, not the one they got. 3 weeks later, Sophia called him. "The boys want to meet you," she said without preamble. "They've been asking more questions. And I think they're old enough to start making their own decisions about whether they want you in their lives." Ethan's hands shook as he held the phone. "When?" "Saturday afternoon. 2 hours at the park near our house. I'll be there the entire time, and if any of them feel uncomfortable or want to leave, we leave immediately." "Of course." "Sophia, thank you. Don't thank me. This isn't for you. It's for them. They deserve the chance to know their father if they want to." Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for October. Ethan arrived at the park early, sitting on a bench with a soccer ball, a science magazine, and a book about ancient Rome small gestures to show he'd been listening to Sophia's hints about their interests. When Sophia arrived with the boys, Ethan's breath caught. They were beautiful, intelligent-looking children who carried themselves with confidence and curiosity. Xavier, clearly the protector, stood slightly in front of his brothers. Isaiah bounced with barely contained energy. Noah observed everything with thoughtful eyes. "Boys," Sophia said gently, "this is your father, Ethan." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Isaiah stepped forward with characteristic directness. "Are you really our dad?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I really am." "Why didn't you want to meet us before?" Xavier asked, his tone protective but not hostile. Ethan knelt down to their eye level. "Because I made terrible mistakes when you were born. I didn't believe your mother when she told me about you. And by the time I realized I was wrong, I had to learn how to be worthy of being your father." "And now you're worthy?" Noah asked with 8-year-old bluntness. "I don't know," Ethan answered honestly. "That's something you'll have to decide for yourselves." Over the next 2 hours, Ethan didn't try to be the perfect father or win their instant affection. Instead, he listened to their stories, answered their questions honestly, and slowly began to understand the remarkable children Sophia had raised. They played soccer until Xavier grudgingly admitted that Ethan wasn't terrible. They discussed Isaiah's latest science experiment until the boy was satisfied that his father was smart enough to understand photosynthesis. They talked about Noah's favorite books until the quiet boy smiled and said, Ethan might have good taste in stories. When it was time to leave, the boys exchanged glances in that silent communication Sophia had described. "Can we see him again?" Xavier asked his mother. "If you want to," Sophia replied, "and if he continues to prove that he's worthy of your time." "I will," Ethan promised, looking at each of his sons in turn. "I'll spend every day for the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of being your father." As they walked away, Ethan heard Isaiah ask Sophia, "Mom, do you think Dad is sorry for the mistakes he made?" "Yes, baby." Sophia replied, "I think he's very sorry." "Sorry enough to maybe try again?" Noah added quietly. Sophia glanced back at Ethan, still sitting on the park bench, and for the first time in 8 years, her expression held something that might have been hope. "Maybe," she said. "We'll have to wait and see." 3 weeks later, that tentative hope would be tested when an unexpected visitor arrived at Sophia's door, someone seeking forgiveness for sins that had shaped 8 years of separation and 3 generations of pain. Chapter 10. Love's Second Chance. 3 weeks after Ethan's first meeting with his sons, the unexpected visitor arrived exactly as Chapter 9 had foreshadowed. It was a rainy Thursday evening in April when the doorbell rang at Sophia's brownstone. She was curled on the couch with Noah, reading together while Xavier and Isaiah played chess nearby, their voices creating the comfortable symphony of the family life she'd built from nothing. Sophia opened the door, expecting a delivery, but instead found a woman she barely recognized standing in the rain without an umbrella. Eleanor Harris Carter looked nothing like the imperious society matron who had destroyed Sophia's life 8 years ago. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfect makeup, the jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. This woman wore a simple black dress that hung loosely on her diminished frame, her silver hair pulled back in a basic ponytail, her face bare and streaked with tears that mixed with the rain. "Mrs. Bennett," Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, may I speak with you?" Sophia's first instinct was to slam the door in the face of the woman who had orchestrated her systematic destruction, but something in Eleanor's demeanor stopped her. This wasn't the calculating manipulator who had paid doctors to lie and had Sophia committed while pregnant. This was a broken woman carrying the crushing weight of unbearable guilt. "What do you want?" Sophia asked, her voice carefully controlled. "To tell you the truth, to apologize." To Eleanor's composure cracked completely, and she began sobbing in the doorway. "To beg for forgiveness I know I don't deserve." "Mom," Xavier's voice came from behind Sophia. "Who is it?" Sophia turned to see all 3 boys standing in the hallway, their curious faces reflecting the warmth and security she'd worked so hard to build for them. The irony struck her. Eleanor was meeting her grandchildren for the first time while seeking forgiveness for trying to steal them at birth. "Boys," Sophia said carefully, "this is your father's mother, your grandmother, Eleanor." Isaiah stepped forward with characteristic directness. "You're our grandmother? Why are you crying?" Eleanor looked at the 3 beautiful children she'd never been allowed to meet, children whose existence she'd denied while they grew in their mother's womb. Her sobs intensified as she knelt down to their eye level. "Because I made terrible, terrible mistakes," she whispered through her tears. "I hurt your family in ways that can never be fixed. I'm crying because I'm sorry, and because you're so beautiful, and because I lost the chance to love you the way a grandmother should." Sophia watched this scene with conflicted emotions. Part of her wanted to protect her children from this woman's pain, but another part recognized that this moment was important. Her sons were seeing genuine remorse, understanding that even adults who make devastating mistakes can feel profound regret. "Why don't you come in out of the rain?" Noah said gently, displaying the compassion that never failed to amaze Sophia. "Boys, go finish your homework upstairs," Sophia said softly. "I need to talk to your grandmother alone." After the children reluctantly went upstairs, Sophia led Eleanor to the living room. Eleanor stood in the center of the space, looking around at the family photos, the children's artwork on the walls, the evidence of the life Sophia had built without any help from the Carter family. "You raised extraordinary children," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "They're kind, intelligent, beautiful, everything a grandmother could hope for, and I gave up any right to know them." "Sit down," Sophia said, not kindly, but not cruelly either. Eleanor perched on the edge of the couch as if she didn't deserve to be comfortable. Fresh tears streamed down her face as she began to speak. "I destroyed your marriage," she said, her voice barely audible. "I paid Dr. Grayson $300,000 to fabricate medical records, to convince Ethan you weren't pregnant, to make him believe you were mentally ill. I hired private investigators to follow you, to document your pregnancy while telling everyone it was delusion. I orchestrated every detail of having you committed to that psychiatric facility." Sophia felt the familiar anger rise, but underneath it was something else, a strange relief that Eleanor was finally speaking the complete truth. "I know all of that now," Sophia said coldly. "Ethan told me after he thought you died." "I didn't, Dee. I was supposed to. Cancer. But the treatments worked, and now I have to live with what I did." Eleanor's hands shook as she reached into her purse. "I brought you something. Proof of everything I did. Bank records, contracts with Dr. Grayson, surveillance photos of you during your pregnancy. Evidence of the most evil thing I've ever done." She placed a thick manila envelope on the coffee table between them. "I documented my own crimes because I was proud of how clever I thought I was. I was proud of manipulating my son into abandoning his pregnant wife." "Why?" The question that had haunted Sophia for 8 years finally escaped. "Why did you hate me enough to destroy my life?" Eleanor's sobs intensified until she could barely speak. Because you made Ethan happy in ways I never could. Because you were everything I wasn't. Genuine, loving, selfless. Because when I saw how he looked at you, I knew I'd lost him forever. So you decided to take him back by destroying me? Yes. I told myself I was protecting him from making a mistake. I convinced myself you weren't good enough for our family, that you'd hold him back. Eleanor looked directly at Sophia through her tears. But the truth is, I was jealous. I was a bitter, controlling woman who couldn't bear to see my son love someone more than he loved me. You had me locked up while I was pregnant with your grandchildren. I know. Eleanor's voice broke completely. I planned to let you give birth in that facility, then have you declared permanently, mentally incompetent so I could take custody of the babies. I was going to raise them as my own while you rotted in a psychiatric hospital. Sophia felt the room spin around her. She'd known Eleanor's plan was elaborate, but hearing the full scope of the intended cruelty was staggering. You were going to steal my children and let me die in that place? Yes. And Sophia, that's not even the worst part. Eleanor was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I knew you were telling the truth. I saw the ultrasound images showing 3 healthy babies. I watched you during your pregnancy, saw how you glowed, how you talked to them, how excited you were. I knew you were carrying triplets, and I let everyone believe you were insane. You knew I was pregnant the entire time. From your 12-week appointment onward, I had copies of every real ultrasound, every blood test confirming the pregnancy. I watched you carry my grandchildren, while I convinced my son you were delusional. Sophia stared at the woman who had been the architect of her nightmares, finally understanding the full scope of the evil that had been perpetrated against her family. I spent 9 months begging people to believe I was pregnant with your son's children, Sophia said. Her voice deadly quiet. I gave birth alone in a psychiatric facility because of you. I raised those 3 boys without their father for 8 years because of you. I know. And I can never undo it. I can never give you back those years, or give Ethan back the chance to see his children born, or give my grandchildren the father they deserved from the beginning. Eleanor reached into her purse again and pulled out legal documents. I've transferred all of my assets into a trust for the boys' education and future. It's not nearly enough to compensate for what I stole from them, but it's everything I have. Money doesn't fix what you did. No, it doesn't. Eleanor stood up, moving toward the door. Nothing fixes what I did. I came here because I'm dying, maybe not from cancer anymore, but from guilt, from regret, from the knowledge that I destroyed the most beautiful love story I ever witnessed. She paused at the door, turning back to face Sophia one final time. You were right about everything. You were an extraordinary wife and mother. You deserved a husband who trusted you, and a mother-in-law who celebrated you. Instead, you got a weak man and an evil woman who destroyed your happiness because we couldn't bear how perfect it was. Eleanor's tears came harder now, 8 years of suppressed guilt pouring out. I've spent years being worshipped by strangers while being hated by the only people who matter. I have money, houses, respect from people who don't know what I really am. But I lost my son, never knew my grandchildren, and caused suffering that will echo through generations. You're right, Sophia said without mercy. You did lose everything that mattered. I know, and I deserve it. But Sophia, please don't let your hatred of me prevent Ethan from having a relationship with those beautiful children. He was my victim, too. I manipulated him as thoroughly as I manipulated everyone else. Sophia studied Eleanor's face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but all she saw was devastating, genuine remorse. I make decisions about my children based on what's best for them, not on my feelings about you. Then you're a better person than I ever was. Eleanor opened the door, then turned back one final time. Those boys upstairs, they're miracles. You raised them with the love I never gave my own son. Maybe that's how this story gets redeemed. Through them, through the love you gave them, despite everything I took away. After Eleanor left, Sophia sat alone in her living room for a long time, processing the encounter. Upstairs, she could hear her boys getting ready for bed, their voices mixing in the comfortable chaos of evening routine. Finally, she picked up her phone and called Ethan. Sophia, is everything okay? Your mother came to see me tonight. That's impossible. She's not dead. She was dying, but she's in remission. Ethan, she told me everything, the whole truth about what she did to us. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. How do you feel? Exhausted, angry, but also free somehow. For 8 years, I've wondered if I was crazy for believing the conspiracy was as extensive as it felt. Now I know it was worse than I imagined. Sophia, I'm so sorry. Come over, she interrupted. Tonight, after the boys are asleep, we need to talk. An hour later, Ethan arrived at Sophia's house, his face reflecting the same emotional exhaustion she felt. They sat together on the couch where Eleanor had confessed her crimes, the weight of 8 years of truth finally settling between them. She knew, Sophia said quietly. The entire time, she knew I was pregnant with triplets. She saw the ultrasounds, the blood work, everything, and she still let you believe I was insane. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. I should have trusted you. Yes, you should have. But Ethan, hearing her tonight, seeing how completely she manipulated everything, I finally understand how you were deceived. It doesn't excuse what you did, but I understand it. What does that mean? Sophia looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in 8 years without the filter of anger and betrayal. It means I've been watching you with our sons for months. You show up when you say you will. You listen to them. You put their needs first. You're becoming the father they deserve. I'm trying. You're succeeding. And that terrifies me. Why? Because I can see the man I fell in love with. Because despite everything, part of me still loves that man, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive being wrong about you again. Before Ethan could respond, they heard small footsteps on the stairs. Noah appeared in the doorway, holding his favorite book about Roman emperors. Dad, will you read me a story, please? Ethan looked at Sophia, who nodded slowly. Just tonight. 30 minutes later, Sophia found Ethan in the boys' bedroom, sitting on the floor between their 3 beds, telling them an elaborate bedtime story about brave knights and lost dragons. All 3 boys were captivated, their faces bright with joy and wonder. And the dragon realized, Ethan was saying, his voice soft with emotion, that the knights weren't trying to hurt him. They were trying to help him find his way home to his family. But he'd been lost for so long. He'd forgotten what home looked like. Did he remember? Isaiah asked breathlessly. The knights showed him that home wasn't a place, Ethan continued. It was the people who loved him enough to keep looking for him, even when he was too scared to come back. Sophia watched from the doorway, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. This was what she'd dreamed of during those lonely months of pregnancy. Ethan telling their children bedtime stories, being the father she'd known he could be. After the boys fell asleep, Sophia and Ethan walked downstairs in charged silence. In the living room, moonlight streamed through the windows, casting silver shadows across the space where their family was slowly, carefully healing. Sophia, Ethan said, turning to face her, I know I don't deserve another chance. I failed you when you needed me most. But watching them tonight, Ethan, Sophia stepped closer, close enough to see the pain and hope warring in his eyes. I've spent 8 years being angry, 8 years protecting myself and our sons from being hurt again. But tonight, after everything your mother said, watching you with them, what? I realized that love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do after you make them. It's about whether you learn, whether you grow, whether you become worthy of the love you threw away. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached up to cup her face. Have I become worthy? Sophia looked into the eyes of the man who had broken her heart so completely that she thought it would never heal. But hearts, she'd discovered, were more resilient than she'd ever imagined. And real love was stronger than betrayal, deeper than pain, more enduring than the worst mistakes people could make. I think so, she whispered, and I'm ready to find out. When Ethan kissed her, it carried the weight of 8 years of separation, the pain of betrayal and abandonment, and the trembling hope of redemption. It was desperate and gentle, an apology and a promise, a reclaiming of love that had survived the unthinkable. I love you, Ethan whispered against her lips. I never stopped, even when I was too broken to deserve it. I love you too, Sophia admitted. The words feeling both foreign and perfectly right. But if we do this, if we try again, it won't be like before. I know. You're stronger now, wiser, more incredible than I ever deserved. And I'm different too. I'm the man who spent 8 years learning the difference between love and control, between trust and blind faith, between being someone's son and being someone's father. Sophia smiled through tears that felt different from any she'd cried. In 8 years, tears of hope instead of grief, of possibility instead of loss. Then maybe we can be different together. Maybe we can build something better than what we lost. Yes, Ethan said, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the living room where their sons played and laughed every day. Yes, we can. They made love that night with 8 years of longing, grief, and hope pouring between them. It was tender and fierce, careful and consuming, a reclaiming of love that had survived betrayal, separation, and the cruelest manipulation imaginable. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Sophia whispered against his chest, "You failed me once, Ethan. You broke my heart and abandoned our children and chose your mother's lies over my truth. I know," he said, his arms tightening around her, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. But this time," she continued, her voice strong with determination and fierce love, "this time, you fight for us every damn day. When it's hard, when people try to tear us apart, when the world tells us we don't belong together, you fight for us." "I will," Ethan promised, tears streaming down his face as he held his wife and felt their family slowly, carefully knitting itself back together. "For you, for them, for everything we lost and everything we can build, I'll fight every damn day." And for the first time in 8 years, Sophia Bennett Carter believed that love could indeed conquer all, not easily, not without scars, but completely and forever. Outside their window, the rain had stopped, and moonlight illuminated a family that had been shattered and was learning to heal a love that had been tested beyond reason and had somehow endured, and 3 little boys sleeping peacefully upstairs who would wake to discover that sometimes, against all odds, broken things could be made beautifully whole again.